So, following the 4 trumpets that I had heard previously, I now saw the 5th angel preparing to emit his divine frequency. It was then that my guide carried me inside the sacrum, between the sacral and coccygeal plexus, and she began to speak, saying, "Know that, as we have seen before, this well in the divine sense is the fountain of Jacob. However, when seen from the infernal side, this well becomes that of the bottomless pit. And I must also teach you that, in the universe of the macrocosm, this bottomless pit is located precisely between the constellations of Scorpio and that of Sagittarius." And suddenly, I saw the pit open under my feet, and smoke came out of it, to the point where the sun became completely blacked out. And I then felt like the good and the truth became veiled by darkness. And my guide spoke, and she said, "Know that this smoke, which you see coming out of this pit, symbolizes the infernal sulfur. But on the other hand, in the macrocosm, this smoke is visible to all, because it corresponds to the dust of the Milky Way, which rise up from this bottomless pit. And know that the vision of the obscured sun is also symbolic, because it represents the visible sign of this trumpet, and this sign will correspond to a series of solar eclipses, which must occur during this period." And when she finished explaining this to me, I saw what seemed like strange locusts appear, and they spread throughout the body. And that's when the voice of my guide was heard. "Now, you must know that what you see is only symbolic, because locusts are known to devour seeds and crops, and in the body, they correspond to an alien organism that comes to devour the spiritual seeds and the harvest of the sacred oil. However, they must not harm the glycoprotein of the cell membranes, nor the vagus or parasympathetic nerves, but only the cells of men who have failed to conquer their lower nature, and who are still in the grip of their ego and fear. And their power is similar to the scorpions of the earth, in the sense that they have the ability to modulate the immune system of men. But on the other hand, they are not allowed to kill these men, but the Lord will let them torment them for 5 states. And I must also tell you that this period must occur between the 2 great American eclipses of 2017 and 2024. And in those days, men will seek and desire death, for despair will overtake them, and they will no longer perceive the good and the truth, and their minds will become confused and filled with darkness, to the point that they will think that what is bad is good, and what is good is bad. And now, as for the strange shape of these locusts, know that it is more clearly explained when looking at the universe of the macrocosm. Because their characteristics indicate where certain eclipses will take place during this time period. So first of all, the appearance of horses ready for battle, with faces of men, tells us when they will begin to spread on the earth, and therefore in the body of men. And this time corresponds to the sign of the annular eclipse of December 26, 2019, which happened right above the bottomless pit, and the head of Sagittarius, which bears the characteristics of horses as well as the faces of men. And their crowns like gold, is represented by the annular eclipse itself above the head of Sagittarius. But in the microcosm of the body, know that these foreign organisms will also take the form of crowns, and if they are similar to gold, it's because they'll be made of infernal sulfur, for gold is associated with divine sulfur, but that of their crown is only similar to gold, and for this reason, we say it's infernal. Then, their scorpion tail, their iron breastplates, and the sound of their wings like several horses running into battle, corresponds to the total eclipse of December 14, 2020, which also took place above the bottomless pit, where the tail of the Scorpio is. And know that iron is symbolically linked to Scorpio, as well as to the natural appearance that these foreign organisms will take. Additionally, the Scorpio is the only constellation to have more than one symbolism, as it is also associated with the eagle, as well as the phoenix. This is why the sound of the wings is related to Scorpio, and this eclipse. And this constellation is next to Libra, which is esoterically linked to the Chariot, because it is the seventh sign of the zodiac, and the Chariot is in fact the seventh tarot card. And on the other side, the Scorpio is followed by Sagittarius, and a bit under the Scorpio, we also find the Centaur, and as you can see, these two constellations display the characteristics of horses running to battle. And you must also know that this eclipse of December 14, 2020 is important, because it's from this moment that these locusts will obtain their power, and it will come from the needles of their scorpion tails, a bit like when they inject their poison in the body of men. However, these locusts will only be able to harm men for 5 successive states, so beware of their stings, because it is these that give power to the locusts. Then, their woman's hair, as well as their lion's teeth, tell us precisely when this moment will take place, since the lion's teeth correspond to the first great American eclipse, of August 21, 2017, which took place in the constellation of Leo. And their female hair for their part, corresponds to the next great American eclipse, which will take place on April 8, 2024, in the constellation of Pisces. However, know that this constellation has always been closely linked to Aphrodite, because she represents one of the 2 fish, and she was also known for her long beautiful hair. And know that during these 7 years, there will be 5 total eclipses, including the 2 great American eclipses. And it is during this period that this 5th trumpet will have its effect. And it will culminate precisely in the center of this period, because there are 2,422 days, which separate the 2 American eclipses, and the one which will give power to the locusts, will occur precisely in the center of this period. Since there are exactly 1,211 days that separate the eclipse of December 14, 2020, from that of 2017, as well as with the one of 2024. And know that these locusts have as king the angel of the abyss, whose name is Apollyon, which mean the destroyer, and the latter, just like this 5th trumpet, is linked to phosphorus, and therefore to RNA and DNA. And this king, in the macrocosm, corresponds to the ancient serpent, which is located just above Scorpio, in the constellation of Ophiuchus. But know that this destroyer and his locusts will only harm men who will still be in the grip of fear, and of their ego consciousness, for the latter will cause them to follow the authorities of the outer world, instead of listening to the higher spirit within them. Then, right after listening to this long explanation, it was time for the 6th angel to make his divine frequency resonate through his trumpet. And it was then that I heard a voice coming out of the 4 horns of the ventricles, which are in front of the Lord, and my guide informed me that the one that I heard was the higher spirit that sits in the crystal's palace. And I heard that the divine spirit asked that the 4 angels who were bound on the Euphrates River be loosed. And then my guide spoke. Know that this great river corresponds in the body of men to the blood flow of the circulatory system, which feeds the whole body, as well as the brain. And this is why I taught you that these angels retain the 4 winds, because as we have already seen, these 4 winds correspond to the 4 lobes of the hemisphere, and it's these winds which must dry up the Euphrates, in order to open the way for the kings of the east, which corresponds to the right hemisphere. And it was then that the 4 angels, who were ready for this precise time, were finally released, in order to completely eliminate the 3rd part of men, who persist in listening to the authorities of the outside world, and only follow their ego conscious, which is related to the left hemisphere of the brain. And being curious, I asked her if the 3rd part of men could also correspond to one of the 3 divisions of the body, as she had taught me, namely, heaven for the brain, the earth which is the part under the diaphragm, and the region under the earth, which represents the genitals. But she replied, "Unfortunately, I am not permitted to reveal this to you at this time." But it was then that I saw a huge army of horses, that seemed to gallop through the blood, and they seemed to be bearers of life and death, for those who rode them wore breastplates of fire, sulfur, and hyacinth. And my guide explained to me, "Know that this fire and sulfur are both destructive and purifying. And this dark purple hyacinth color is synonymous with their power over the human psyche. And the characteristic of horses is also symbolic, since it too relates to the unconscious psyche of men. This is why their lion heads as well as their mouths, which spit fire, smoke, and brimstone, symbolize the destructive power of evil, and the falsehoods of evil on the minds of men. It's the same with their serpent tails, and their heads by which they harm. For the head is related to the mind, and the serpent tail is always related to the lowest sensual aspect, and therefore the false itself. This is why those who persist in following their ego-conscious, as well as the authorities of this outer world, instead of the higher spirit that indwells them, will fall victim to the falsehoods of evil, and these will lead them to their downfall. Because you must know that it's during this period of time that the dragon, the beast as well as the false prophet, who are the diabolical spirits who pull the strings of the military, financial, and religious arms of this world of darkness, will go towards the kings of the world to spread their falsehoods, and to prepare them for the great battle against the one who rides the white horse, which is the bearer of truth. However, those who have followed the teachings of the Lord, and overcome their lower nature, will be able to see this fire as purifying. This is why the Lord said that you will see wars, and hear the sound of wars, but know that it must happen, in order to bring darkness to light. And don't forget that it still won't be the end. Then, I must also tell you that the characteristics of these horses are once again indications of the period of time during which the effect of this sixth trumpet will take place in the macrocosm. Because they are once again linked to a series of total eclipses. And know that this trumpet will complete the list of the 6 main organic elements of the body, since this one is linked to sulfur. So, first of all, the appearance of the horses tells us when this period will begin. And this time corresponds to the total eclipse of December 4, 2021, which took place once again in the Sagittarius constellation, just below the ancient serpent, which has the head on one side of Ophiuchus, and its tail on the other side. Moreover, know that the Sagittarius is closely linked to the fire element, as well as to spiritual truth. Then their heads like lions, corresponds to the total eclipse which is to occur in the Leo constellation, just in front of the mouth of the lion, on August 12, 2026. And this constellation, just like that of Sagittarius, is also closely linked to the fire element. In addition, note that the head of the Hydra serpent is also right next to it. However, I must also inform you that there are 1,712 days, which separate these two eclipses, and the influence of this trumpet will probably reach its peak precisely in the middle of this period. And more particularly, during the eclipse of April 8, 2024. Because this eclipse will occur exactly 856 days following that of 2021, and 856 days before the one of 2026. And you should know that although the eclipse of 2024 will be in the Pisces constellation, it will occur just above the white horse, represented by the Pegasus constellation, which in the body is associated with the seahorse of the hippocampus. And the latter and this constellation are directly linked to the cellular memory, as well as to the unconscious psyche. And when the divine spirit rides that horse, it allows each cell to rediscover the memory of their origins, and ultimately, recognize the truth and the divine good, in order to restore the value of life, love, and regeneration. This is why many humans will begin to awaken during this time, for they will begin to recognize the truth, as the evil will be brought to light. However, they will have to be patient and strong, so as not to give in to falsehoods. They will have to maintain pure love towards their neighbor, as well as with the superior spirit that dwells in them. But those who persist in following their ego consciousness, and the authorities of this outer world will find their conscience being deceived and manipulated by evil and the falsehoods of evil, for they will not perceive the light and truth within, and will be in the grip of the lies of the ancient serpent, believing that good is bad and what's bad is good. But unfortunately, that will only lead to their downfall, because these lies will cause them to feel inflamed in the face of the truth, to the point where they will be ready to make war on the good and the true, because they will be convinced that what's wrong is right. But on the other hand, those who will not be killed by these plagues, and who will not have found the memory of their origin, will still not repent, and some of them will continue to worship their statue of false god, who can neither see, nor hear, nor walk. And they won't even repent of the atrocities they have caused, nor of their falsity and of their poisonings, and not even of their erroneous judgments. And this will extend over time, because the two eclipses following that of 2026 will take place in the Cancer constellation, right above the head of the Hydra serpent, and these total eclipses will occur in 2027 and 28. In other words, the influence of this sixth trumpet could stretch until around 2030. But know that all these men will also wake up at the last trumpet. For as soon as this last angel will resonate his divine frequency, which will come from the Carina Nebula, found in the constellation of the mythical Ark of Argo, all will be changed in the blink of an eye, and all will recognize the divine light. And those who will have followed the teaching of the Lord will wake up in unconditional love, and those who will have preferred to follow their ego will wake up, but in shame. And know that I cannot reveal to you the precise time of this final trumpet, because only the Lord knows. But I was allowed to tell you that the time is near, because He's at the door. So, this will be the end of the sixth part. Don't miss the next one, it will soon be available on my channel, and in the meantime, I send you lots of love. And don't forget that, He's in all of us, and we are all in Him.